Mr. Higgins, do you have a motion you'd like to make, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, I'll make the motion and I'll comment on it. This will be a policy statement. I move the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors is opposed to any legislation that's come or may be introduced, that has or may be introduced in the Virginia General Assembly that could have the effect of unlawfully infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens to keep and bear arms as guaranteed by the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution and Article 1, Section 13 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Motion's made. Is there a second to the motion? Motion made and seconded by Mr. Bona. A discussion on the motion. Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that with all the discussion about curbing firearm violence that's been going around, and I think everybody at this table or at this dais would be in concurrence with that, and we would all concur that we should keep firearms out of the hands of criminals and those with serious psychological disorders that would cause them to injure themselves or others. But we also want to make sure that we protect the constitutional rights and not criminalize law-abiding citizens who own firearms. Given some of the over-restrictive laws that have been proposed in the legislature and the fact that there is currently a case that was argued yesterday before the Supreme Court against the City of New York on over-restrictive firearm laws, I would like our delegation to be, I think we would like our delegation to be mindful of the Constitution of the United States and of Virginia and not consider laws that would violate them. And I think that since all of us swore an oath to uphold the Constitution in both situations, that this wouldn't be a problem, that we would not want to accept laws that violate the Constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. I'm not sure whose lights went on first. I think it might have been Ms. Umstadt, so I'll come to you first, ma'am.
Thank you. My concern with this is it doesn't really do anything. And for those who are concerned about gun violence, maybe that would be seen as a good thing. We have all taken an oath, as have all members of the General Assembly, to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Any law that might be passed can be challenged in the courts, as some laws have been. And sometimes folks who are strong advocates for the Second Amendment, and I actually consider myself one of those, will think that one law is an infringement on the Second Amendment, whereas a court may disagree. Some folks may have felt that the right to own assault weapons was an exercise of their Second Amendment rights. But at one point in our history, the Supreme Court disagreed and said you do not have a right under the Second Amendment to own assault weapons. I think this is unnecessary. I understand where Supervisor Higgins is coming from, but it doesn't do anything. It just restates our oath of office. It doesn't accomplish anything. And so I'm not sure why it's before us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I've had to oppose some really uncomfortable things that have been brought that I've always said are more politically motivated, not Loudoun specific motions. Our legislative agenda is really on issues that impact Loudoun County government and our activities, right? And so when the Equal Rights Amendment came before us, which I actually support, came before our legislative agenda, I said, listen, I support it, but these social issues don't necessarily belong in our legislative agenda. That's not really the purpose of it. And so just because it's a different party proposing, basically social language, I don't think it belongs on our legislative agenda. And you can't be hypocritical and vote against what the Democrats have brought this whole term and try to put in our legislative package, whether it's on gun violence, on equal rights, on LGBTQ rights, and then go ahead and propose conservative language on social issues and say, well, we should vote for it because I agree with it this time, right? That is total hypocrisy. Total hypocrisy. This is a ceremonial gimmick that doesn't do anything at all, like Supervisor Umstad says. It doesn't oppose any particular bills. It says that we're going to support the Constitution. We all took that oath already, and so did all the members of the General Assembly. And so, you know, we are not the Supreme Court. The Board of Supervisors in Loudoun County is not going to decide what is or isn't against the Second Amendment. And so to pretend like we can or that we have some sort of influence on that, I think is disingenuous. And if you want to make an impact on Second Amendment rights, act locally. Don't hold up initiatives or don't try to hold up initiatives that would actually make for commercial gun ranges in Western Loudoun so people could safely practice their Second Amendment rights without endangering others by doing these crappy backyard ranges, right? And we could have, we are doing that, thankfully, but to the opposition of the maker of this motion, right? And so the proof is in the pudding. We can act locally to make sure people are safer and have better rights. That's not, I don't think, the intent of this motion. Finally, what I'll say is this. I will make an amendment to the motion that starts after the language that says have the effect of unlawfully infringing on the rights. Instead of saying unlawfully infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens, I would say unlawfully infringing on the Bill of Rights, period. And that would be my amendment.
Is that a friendly amendment offer?
No.
That's an amendment, okay.
Just to say that we would, well, all right, I'll make it as a friendly amendment.
Do you want to accept that as a friendly amendment? Did you hear it? Did you hear it?
I don't see where it changes the motion, and so I don't see any need to change it.
Would you like him to say it again so you can hear it again?
Yeah.
I'm concerned in this motion about
No, I understand that, Mr. Mr. Higgins, I understand that. I'm asking,
concerned about
Mr. Higgins, you're not in your time right now. I'm just asking you, would you like for him to say it again so that you can hear it again, so you can decide if you want to accept the friendly? Otherwise, he'll probably be making a substitute motion or an amendment.
Restate your motion, Mr. Meyer.
So the amendment would remove.
Just read the motion
Okay.
as it would read.
The Loudoun County Board of Supervisors approved any legislation that has or may be introduced in the Virginia General Assembly that could have the effect of unlawfully infringing on the Bill of Rights.
Would you like to accept that, Mr. Higgins?
No, I don't.
Okay, Mr. Well, he hasn't made, so you want to make an amendment?
Yes, I would formally move the amendment of the language I just read.
Okay, so now we're discussing Ron's amended motion. So discussion on that. Mr. Meyer.
If we're going to support one right, we should support them all. Like I said, I'm not really sure it's the place of local government to weigh in on those issues unless we have something that directly impacts the operations of Loudoun County government. If we want to do a general support of the whole Bill of Rights, then that's probably harmless.
Mr. Saines.
Well, I'll speak on the motion from Mr. Meyer, but I'd like to speak when we get out of that to Mr. Higgins' motion. I think we're splitting hairs here. I don't think we need to do any of this, period.
Do you want to speak on Mr. Meyer's motion? Because your light's still on, sir.
I sure would.
Okay.
If that's what we're going to vote on.
Okay.
That amendment fundamentally changes my motion. I certainly agree with all of the Bill of Rights. However, the one in particular that is under attack or potentially under attack by the General Assembly is the Second Amendment, and that's the purpose of this motion, or my motion. And so I don't want that one to get lost in the shuffle, and so I don't accept it. I don't want to support it, and I hope we'll go back to the main motion.
Okay, I would say I don't believe we need either one of these motions, to be quite honest. And truthfully, when I, earlier in this term, made a motion to have control over our local land, that was voted down because it was said that that was a state issue. And then made a motion to have that issue go to referendum, voted on by the Loudoun County residents. That was voted down, although the Loudoun County residents would be voting on that. That was voted down. I have made quite a few motions that I think do impact Loudoun County residents, and I have been told that they would be voted down because they were state or federal issues and not appropriate for a legislative item. I didn't always agree with that, but okay. This definitely falls under an issue that is not a local issue. And quite frankly, this issue was just litigated. It was litigated for an entire year. And we had a result to that litigation. And that result to that litigation was called an election. And as far as I'm concerned, this is nothing more than an adult political temper tantrum. This is beating the floor and holding your breath and rolling around because you didn't like what happened on November 5th. And I'm not supporting any of this. Mr. Bona.
Yeah, I do want to be clear, and I'm not sure where I'm going with all this either, because frankly, it's all symbolic. In the end, Richmond decides this, and then after that's decided, then even the federal courts can decide this. However, it is appropriate for a legislative agenda because Richmond is the one's going to vote on it, and our legislative agenda tries to influence how things are voted on in Richmond. My big concern with what I've seen so far, and let's say this, nothing has been passed in Richmond. There's no language. We don't know what's going to pass or not pass. So we're kind of shooting in the dark at this point, and it really probably ought to just be deferred once we know what the actual legislation is. But I do have one overarching concern about what I'm seeing on some of the pre-filings, and that is there is potential legislation that would turn currently law-abiding citizens who did something in a lawful manner instantly into felons. Instantly. Because all of a sudden, possession of a magazine over so many rounds is a felony. Well, I could have bought that legally under one law, and now all of a sudden I own it, and I'm a felon just overnight? How does that work? And some of the legislation is doing that. That's like telling me that I can only buy 750 millimeters of vodka at an ABC store, and if you have more than that in your liquor cabinet, you're an instant felon. But I bought 1.5 liters last week when it was legal. Okay? You can't turn people into criminals who haven't done anything. And all they've done is what they did was legal at the time. And some of the legislation being proposed down there does just that. Some of the pre-filings. That is a major concern to me. Regardless of where you are on this issue, you can't turn people that have done nothing illegal into felons. And what does that do for our system? What are you going to do? Come knock on my door and start confiscation? How do you even know what I have or don't have? So now we're going to do a legal search and seizure into my house? I mean, this is a very slippery slope if we start going down to this kind of legislation. And it is a very, very big concern. All of us are concerned about gun violence, but I'm also concerned about infringement on rights. So this particular item is going to be voted on in Richmond. We don't know how it's going to read yet, but some of the pre-filings are scary as heck. And so there has to be some kind of position. Unfortunately, I do agree with Supervisor Higgins that this is mostly Second Amendment. But, you can't say, well, I don't agree with this law, so I'm not going to enforce it. But, both sides of the aisle do this. The other party right now is ignoring ICE detainers. They're saying we're going to ignore and become sanctuary cities, even though this is the law of the land. So you can't have it both ways. The law is the law, regardless of what party you're in. And that's what needs to be followed. If you don't like the laws, lobby to get them changed. Thank you.
Mr. Meyer, back to you for a close.
Well, I'm just happy that Ralph just brought, Supervisor Bona just brought up both the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, which is exactly, unlawful searches and seizures. That's exactly why we need the full motion, right? That's why we need to protect all of the Bill of Rights. My motion to say the whole Bill of Rights is not because I really think we need this in our legislative agenda. It's to prove a point. The whole premise of this motion was, how could you oppose the Constitution? How could you oppose the Second Amendment? So therefore, let's say you support it, and let's put it on the record. If you vote against this motion, you oppose the Bill of Rights. Nobody actually opposes the Bill of Rights if they vote against this motion. I don't think Supervisor Higgins, by voting against this, means he opposes the Bill of Rights. That's why these sorts of gimmicks aren't worth our time on the County Board of Supervisors. We have local issues. Supervisor Bona, I'm going to replay you the debate we had on the ERA. That's a vote that's happening in Richmond. That is a vote that's happening in Richmond. I'm going to replay the vote when we had discussions about LGBT protections in Richmond, with votes going on in Richmond about it. And we said, you know what? That's not a county-specific issue, specific to our county government. I voted along with the majority to say, you know what? Let's keep a narrow focus on this legislative agenda to actually get stuff done that's specifically to us, not for us to try to be little state legislators when we're not state legislators. If you want to be in the General Assembly, run And if you've run and lost and you want to cry about it some more, I don't think this is the way to do it. And so we need to stick to our focus as a county government, and the next board needs to as well. What I would say is the precedent this board set, I hope the next board looks at to try to not politicize the legislative agenda. This motion, the original motion tries to do that. Frankly, I don't really care if this motion passes on the Bill of Rights. It's literally to prove a point that says if you want to make a motion that says I support seashells and balloons and people vote against it, that means they oppose seashells and balloons, right? The ceremonial stuff has to stop. We have serious business to conduct as a county. The next board is serious business. Let's keep the focus that.
All right, so the motion was made by Supervisor Meyer and seconded by amendment and seconded by Supervisor Umstattd. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. So that will be a 5-3-1 vote, so that will pass. Okay, so that would be a 4-3-1, and it still passes. So the 4-4. Oh, it's a 4-4? So that fails. So it dies. We're back to to prove a point. He said that 3 times. So, okay, well, now we're back to the main motion, of which Mr. Higgins has spoke on already, Mr. Myers has spoke on already, and I think that's... You do get to go to the close, but we're not there yet. But anyone can speak, of course, I know that. But anyone can speak on this, now we're back to the main motion, but you're going to close when it comes. Ms. Volpe.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We've actually received, emails on this, and I'll tell you what I have sent to folks. I've said thank you for your note regarding the Second Amendment Sanctuary County Resolution. I would be more than happy to sponsor such a resolution. However, there isn't time left in the term to complete such a resolution. My opponent, a Moms Demand Action member, won the election along with other, advocates of, gun control advocates who will take office in less than a month. The majority of my current colleagues who would probably support something along these lines would be leaving the board. Under the circumstances, if the current board were to try and add something, it would probably be at our last meeting on the 17th. I would fear that the new board coming in would rescind this action at their first business meeting in January. And then I said, it is sad to say, but elections do have consequences. That was basically my response, okay? I really don't know what to do with this. I support the Second Amendment. Let's be honest, the folks that are coming in January, I would assume the majority of the board members coming in, would probably not be supportive of this motion and would be supportive of some of the legislative items that have been pre-filed. My concern really becomes from, let's use the basic thing. Most bills that are filed, for example, there's always what you would call a grandfather. Supervisor Bona brings up the fact that, someone who has purchased an item, say on January 1st of 2020, literally becomes a felon. What if you have a firearm that was given to you, say, by your grandfather? You become a felon. And the question becomes, what's the difference between having a clip that holds 10 rounds and a clip that holds 11 rounds? What's the difference? Who makes that determination that one is allowable and one isn't? It's very disconcerting. So for me, I'm actually going to support Supervisor Higgins' motion. But as I stated in, my email response, I assume the board's position will change as the legislative agenda goes forward and actual pieces of legislation
Ms. Volpe, your time
are
is
done.
up.
Thank you.
By the way, that was really dramatic music, so that was really very
Why
helpful
the guy dove
to the
down on the
moment.
floor with his phone.
It was so drama. So I appreciate the soundtrack. Appreciate that very much. It wasn't. It was this woman in the back.
It was one of the county staff members.
Wow, it's gonna call you out now. Wow. Wait, you turning completely red. It's also turning you. Mr. Buffington.
I want that guy's phone number so I can call during the meeting anytime I want and just hear that. But to the motion we're about to vote on, I'm going to support it. I would support the Second Amendment. I see nothing wrong with this. But honestly, we're wasting our time with this. The next board, in less than a month, even before the General Assembly goes into session, is going to swipe this right out of our legislative agenda, I guarantee you. So we're wasting our time here. If you support the Second Amendment, then you should be lobbying state representatives, delegates, and senators. You should be joining the NRA or donating to the NRA or joining one of the other pro-Second Amendment, pro-gun organizations, because they're going to be the ones down, hopefully with you all, in Richmond lobbying against this sort of thing. And if some new law that does infringe, and I know that's up to different people's opinion, but that you feel infringes upon your Second Amendment right, it's going to be the NRA and other groups like that. That are going to be filing lawsuits against it in court, so we can get an answer from a court as to whether or not it actually infringes. And so again, I'm wasting your time right now. You know, as these seconds go by, this is a big waste of time. In a month, this will be back off of here, and that'll be before the session even starts. Thank you.
Mr. Saines.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm actually shocked that this is even coming up. Well, I guess in my head, I thought we weren't going to bring this up because, again, over and over again during this board's term, we've been told, keep it nonpartisan, don't bring partisan stuff up here on the dais to vote on, to put in the legislative packet, to do partisan resolutions, et cetera, when it's brought up. But here we are. This language is cherry-picked verbatim from the organization. I'm not going to even give them the time of day to say their name, but everybody knows the organization. We've been getting emails left and right about it for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Verbatim, the language that's in this item came from that language, from the email from this organization that's very, very partisan. So again, I guess in my head, again, we've been told not to bring partisan stuff up here. We've stopped doing that, but yet here we are talking about very partisan items and social issues. So I'm shocked that, hey, you can tell us to do it when we bring it, but when it's something that a social issue you care about, here you are, you're bringing it to us. We're told, oh, don't bring this up because this is a General Assembly issue. We shouldn't be bringing this up. It's not something to do with Loudoun County, so we take it off or we don't bring it up. But here we are, something that does not affect, Loudoun County directly in a sense. This is a General Assembly issue. Here we are talking about something that you've told us not time and time again not to bring up. And so, yes, Supervisor Buffington, you are 100% correct. This will be one of the first items on the agenda. If we vote for this and this gets approved tonight, this will be one of the first items in January, that January 7th meeting, that we'll vote directly to take this right out of our legislative packet. So you can go ahead and vote for this. If it passes, then we'll take it right on out in January. But I hope you guys will vote this down, because even, I'm not going to say it, one of my colleagues up here, when we first started getting the emails, whispered and said, oh, can't believe we're getting this email. We shouldn't even be discussing this. And that's one of the members that are sitting here tonight. So again, you said not to bring partisan stuff up here. We didn't do it, but here you are bringing some partisan stuff because it's in your wheelhouse. So that is hypocrisy. So again, I say don't vote for this, but if you do, again, January 7th, we'll be voting to take this out. So thank you. And for the record, I do support the Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights, the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you.
Mr. Boner.
Yeah, that's a little bit ironic. I support the Second Amendment, but I'm going to vote against something that says I support the Second Amendment. Then I'm going to take it out. Well, good, take it out. That's your prerogative, but it's on you to take it out and say you don't support the Second Amendment. I don't buy that argument. Also, let's be careful of the word partisan. These emails have come from a lot of groups, but the predominant organization that you're referring to, attacks Republicans just about as much as they attack Democrats. They have attacked Supervisor Meyer mercifully. They've attacked Supervisor Letourneau mercifully. I mean, they go after both sides of the aisle on these issues. And the Second Amendment isn't their only issue. It's not Second Amendment. They come out on a lot of different issues. And we know who they are. We know who's behind these groups. But it's not all partisan. What they're about is they are constitutionalists. There's a big difference between constitutionalists and partisans. Constitutionalists simply believe in the Constitution of the United States and believe that even after way over 200 years, that it's a solid document, and that that's what we ought to be following. And that's what this organization is all about. And the word constitutional is in their name, so you can figure it out from there, okay? But it's not all partisan. They go after both sides of the aisle. But it's hypocritical, but in a different way, to say I support the Second Amendment, but I'm going to vote no on it tonight, and it's going to be the first thing I take out is a statement that simply says we support the Second Amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Volpe.
I'm just going to make a short statement, and when you talk about saying, oh, we're not going to do anything partisan, we're not going to do anything partisan, I just then asked, Madam Chair, if you'd go ahead and take off your mom's demand action
I will not.
button, because that's a partisan
I will
organization.
not. Nope, actually, they're
and
not. They're actually
it's,
not, and I will not take it off.
You know,
So
so,
there's your answer.
okay. So if we're not going to be partisan, then thank you.
There's your answer. Ms. Did you want to speak on this before? So I got to tell you, I am embarrassed for you all at this point. I am embarrassed for you. The amount of times you have come to us and said you cannot bring these issues because the General Assembly is going to vote on them, and we shouldn't speak to that. It's a General Assembly issue. Ms. Umstead earlier in the term bought a resolution to recognize LGBTQ month, and you all not only voted that down, but in voting that down, you stripped the chair's power to alone decide what resolutions come because you said it was too partisan. I lost power of the board on an LGBTQ resolution. You all have told us over and over again not to bring issues that the General Assembly is going to vote on. This is no different, and every single one of you know it. The amount of twisting and turning you're doing to make this okay is embarrassing. It absolutely is. You can vote on it if you want to or not vote on it, but do not act like this is any different than everything else we've talked about up here, because it absolutely is not. It absolutely is not. It's a General Assembly issue. It's not a local issue in a way that everything, I mean, again, I put up a resolution to have control over our own land and what sits on that land, and you all voted that down because you said it was a state issue. I put up a resolution to have the Loudoun County voters vote on that. You voted it down because you said it was a state issue. I put up a motion to have our local contractors have more points when they're in the General Assembly for RFPs. You voted that down because you said it was a state issue. Those were all things that involve Loudoun citizens. This has nothing to do with Loudoun citizens. You all are twisting yourself in pretzels to say yes to this. Say yes to it if you want to, but do not be hypocritical while you're doing it. And as my father said, y'all can smooth believe we are changing this on January 7th, right away. So if it's not a deal for you, it's not a deal for you. But yes, elections do have consequences. And these elections, we didn't squeak by the people who talked about these. This was litigated and voted on, and those votes were not even close. It was clear. It was crystal clear. This is a stunt, and you should be embarrassed. Mr. Higgins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I am neither embarrassed or ashamed. I would also note that Supervisor Umsted's motion was passed by this board it certainly was. It was passed by this board with an amendment from Mr. Meyer.
We didn't.
Well, you can argue all you want. Go back and look at the record. It's my time, not yours. I do not think that the Constitution or the Bill of Rights is either partisan or conservative. It's our founding documents, both statewide and federally. And with regards to the ERA, Mr. Meyer, you did not vote for the ERA. You abstained from that vote. Just for if you want to correct a few votes here tonight that we've been talking about, that did or did not happen. This is an issue that we need to be concerned with because of the Dillon rule and because when these laws are passed, we will be the ones that have to enforce them. And we will be the ones that get drawn into lawsuits because of enforcement of laws that are unconstitutional or potentially unconstitutional. And to argue against having a policy statement, we have general policy statements on roads, on taxing authority, on unfunded mandates, on school funding. I could go on and on and on. This is a policy statement that we think they should consider the Constitution when they're looking at these laws, and we hope that they will. But some of the laws, as Supervisor Volpe said, that have been suggested already are pretty unbelievable because of the emotion and thing that's involved, I guess. And another point that Ralph made about making people felons, I have a World War II bring back that my father brought back from Normandy. He was a veteran of Normandy, 101st Airborne Division, landed in Normandy. This rifle is hung on the wall in his house until 2012 when he died, and it hangs on the wall in my house now. Under this law that's been proposed, I will be a felon with this rifle that is 75 years old and hasn't been fired in 75 years. Instantly, 1 year in jail. That's what we're looking at. Those are the kind of things that we don't want to see happen to law-abiding individuals. And so people that own firearms that were purchased legally, been handled with care and carefully, these people, if you look at these potential laws that they're going to pass, will be felons. And it's not, if you have a number of these weapons, you have one felony. Each one of these violations is a Class 6 felony, which is a year in jail. So one would hope that the General Assembly will take this item very carefully, consider the effects on law-abiding citizens, look at how we can actually curb gun violence without infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens, and accomplish something meaningful and not something that is unconstitutional or jeopardizes people's liberties because they've been made an instant felon. So I would hope that since we all support the Constitution, I think I heard it 7 or 8 times tonight, and the Bill of Rights, that we'll vote for this tonight.
Time is up, sir. Thank you. Motion was made by Mr. Higgins, seconded by Mr. Bona. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? No. Would, wow. Wow. So let's do that again, because I think we have, it was 4, wait a minute, we have 4 noes, and, no, I don't think so. 2, 4, 2. Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, if you're voting yes, please raise your hand. If you're voting no, please raise your hand. If you're abstaining, please raise your hand. Okay, so it's 2, 4, 2, 1. And so the motion fails. All right.